Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Once again, it's a big good evening from me, Kervin Julian, all the way in Coventry, England.
My crime.
You're in tune to Issues Today, live on World Jam Global Radio.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
We've got a special debate on for you today.
Back in the day,
with a very special guest indeed.
System, it was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school.
Right on the back of the paradigm shift which we had with Alex Salazar last week,
with my hands in
where we looked at how police reform must change.
All over the street, I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game is.
And the work being done by particular ex-officers who are compelled to try and make an impact and a difference in the way that policing is seen in the community today. Today we're going to look at the law.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time.
My guest Jonathan Newton will be on very shortly.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
With some very intricate and specific
already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Contributions to law reform.
Drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you.
We got a lot to get through today.
I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than...
On a week,
wow, like a...
claiming it has the power to hit the US.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
On a week where Trump claims that a UK deal will be done very quickly indeed.
Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time.
And we woke up to the sad news this morning of a mother and 3 children dying in a house fire in Bolton, northern England.
My crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote.
News, and more news.
And this is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't be.
As Great Britain basks in the hot sun.
Swimming in women.
And we look forward to another heat wave next week.
Getting money, life is so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been real.
Wimbledon begins and Andy Murray wins his first match.
It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
And the Sunderland football mascot, young Bradley, tragically dies of cancer.
My crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent, I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison. Prison.
Well.
Well, don't forget you can catch us live on www.worldjamglobalradio.com. You can follow us on TuneIn, Facebook, Twitter, and all social media platforms.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Trying to cope with this living hell. This living hell. This living hell. This living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
And sometimes as we see
Our Father who art in heaven, how will it be that
as we see things moving around the world, and especially the way that the police brutality has exploded onto our screens over the last 2 or 3 years in particular,
and forgive us our trespass.
we begin to wonder what's happened to the law that we grew up to respect.
Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the
And I'm hoping that our guest, Jonathan Newton,
heaven and
today is going to give us an understanding
Pay for my crime. Pay for
of that law.
my crime. Pay for my crime.
As we get our heads around this one.
All those drive-by killings stop.
Our thoughts go out continually to our producer, Teresa.
He who is
Give
out.
thanks for all the hard work that goes on behind the scenes.
I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. And put down those knives. Stop stabbing each other. Yeah.
Well, without no further ado, let me just introduce our guest. Jonathan Newton, are you there, sir?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Jonathan, how are you? Well, here's an opportunity for you to introduce yourself, tell our audience a little bit about you, what you do, and where you're from, etc.
Okay. Currently, I am the president and founder of the National Association Against Police Brutality. I live right outside of Washington, D.C. in a suburb called Largo, Maryland. I'm a recent graduate of the D.C. University of the District of Columbia David A. Clark School of Law. I just graduated law school in 2017. I'm originally from Key West, Florida, and I've been living here in the D.C. metro area since 2014. I'm a former law enforcement officer, and I'm involved in police accountability work through the National Association Against Police Brutality.
Wow, that's some resume. And how long was you a a serving officer for, Jonathan?
Not long, only 6 years altogether.
And what was your experiences in that?
I was a non-sworn personnel for some time before I became a sworn law enforcement officer, and it wasn't as extensive as most of my colleagues that are in this field. I was a public information officer for a large sheriff's office in south of Atlanta, and my experience was basically looking at it from a management standpoint, working with the management team of the law enforcement agency. At that time, my job was simply to communicate the messages of the sheriff, and also receive complaints, and also put out public awareness notices and that sort of stuff. Then I went to the police academy, became a standard beat officer. My experience was that I worked in a small town called Palmetto, Georgia. Very small town policing. We had about 8 officers on that police force. Where I was, I didn't see the big city excessive force issues that we're seeing today. However, I did see the complexity of the issue when I worked at the sheriff's office, and so I blew the whistle on a sheriff in Georgia in 2008. He retaliated against me by making some accusations that really led to me being later indicted. 2.5 years later, I was indicted by a second sheriff. It's a very complex story, but I ended up getting indicted on 13 felony counts. Once I processed through the system, I was offered my job back, and I chose to go to law school instead. So, it's one of those things where that ended up becoming the impetus for me to do the work that I do now. I have seen firsthand how the system does treat some people of color, and I also see how institutionally and structurally the system treats people of color and black people completely different than it does white people in some instances.
You know, in the midst of all of this police brutality that we've seen, in the midst of all of the police brutality that has been perpetrated, especially against black folk out in America, over here in the UK, we've often, if you've not caught any of our shows over the last 2 years in particular, it's very difficult for people over here in the UK to actually believe that the land of milk and honey that we play little brother to can appear to be so far behind the times as far as legitimacy, basic human rights, and how the standing, the community standing is as far as policing is concerned. And most people do not believe in the reason, the purpose for Black Lives Matter. Most don't believe black people are victimized as badly as it's portrayed, and most people don't believe that it's mainly black African Americans who have been shot while unarmed and specifically not in the pursuit of criminal activity. How does that relate to you? How do you see that from where your standpoint?
It's interesting to note that folks outside of America, and it's not surprising though, I will say this, it's interesting to note that folks outside of America don't see what's happening inside America. Folks inside America don't see what's happening outside of America. And so we view, I imagine this is the same for you as well, we view what happens outside of America through the lens largely of mainstream media in America. And so if it's not shown on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, or ABC, or CBS, one of those major networks, chances are we don't see it as American citizens, by and large. There are things that happen all across the continent of Africa. There are things that happen all across the world that American citizens don't see. And likewise, in your situation, there are things that happen inside America that the world doesn't see. There are things that happen inside America that even Americans don't see. There are cases that we'll hear about at the National Association Against Police Brutality that have not made it to mainstream media, and therefore they have not come into the national conscience of Americans. And so it's not surprising that you guys over there don't get to see, or are surprised to find out that that this has been going on. It's not surprising. What's interesting though is that when you really look at the narratives that are being told even inside America to Americans, and just give folks outside of America the same sort of narrative, it can be really expected that most people won't understand what's going on inside America when it comes to police encounters with people of color and the black community. And so it's not surprising that you are surprised to learn, because most Americans are surprised to learn. Most Americans still hold the police in high esteem, but most black Americans do not hold the police in high esteem. And this has to do with we have two policing systems in America, and that is one for white people and one for people of color and black people. And that's just the paradigm that exists here in America. The way that policing is done in black and brown communities is completely different than the way policing is done in most white and affluent communities. I will say, however, I want to make this point known to you. The way that the police brutality issue has been presented in America to the American audience, and also to people all across the world, it's a mischaracterization. It is accurate to say that more black and brown people are affected by police misconduct. It is inaccurate to say that police misconduct is a black and brown issue. There are white brothers and sisters who are going through this exact same thing as we talked today that have been impacted by police misconduct. The problem is, again, we view this issue through the lens of the national media. And when that happens, we're only seeing what we're shown. And we're not seeing the stories of white people who are affected by this. We're not shown the stories of women that are affected by this. We're not shown other people. And so everybody is fighting the issue from their own silo. And that's a problem because it's a common issue among us, but it's not commonly fought together, and that's a big problem.
I'm gonna throw this scenario to you before we really start getting into the nitty gritty of the real meat of this particular show, because I raised this issue when we had one of our big cross conference police brutality shows about 2 years ago, and it stumped everybody, and I just want to see how you respond to this. So, as far as police brutality and unlawful killing is concerned, right? And it's black, mainly, a lot of it seems to be perpetrated against, black African Americans, and that's the main feature of what we're looking at right now. The common response by a police officer who is in that position is that he was in fear for his life, right? And that's against an unarmed individual who's not known to have any violent record or has no criminal record prior to anything else. He's not known to the police. There is no history of him creating havoc in the community or anything else. But the police will still come up and stomp up this, I was in fear of my life, which is why I pulled the trigger. So the question that I asked was, how many times have we had a situation like this, and the person at the end of the gun has been a female officer, and they couldn't come up with any stats, because for me, it doesn't seem to be. Well, let me put that another way. If anyone should be in fear of their life, it would be a female more than a male who probably has the more muscular physique to be able to be quick enough to do something different. But I couldn't understand why females weren't the ones pulling the trigger quite quickly for being in fear of their lives. And the response I got back then was that the women, female police officers, police differently. So my question was, well, why don't we just train the officers to police the way that the female police officers police? And we might not get so many gun-ho happy police officers. Now, I don't know what your taking is on that, and I don't know whether you have any other information that you can bring to us on that, but there doesn't seem to be much of a record of female police officers emptying their guns in the backs of an individual who's fleeing from the police who's told them to stop, and they're scared. You get my scenario.
Yeah. I think there's some. First off, you don't see many women police officers in police work. There's a little over 900,000 police officers throughout the country. About 26% of them are females, according to the FBI statistics. The way I've not looked at it from the way that women police. I will say this, that there is among police officers a myriad of personalities that end up out onto the road policing, and they all go through a training scenario that talks about the law and the way that the law states the standard for use of force, and that's where it creates the problems. Is that you can even have and so let me just give you the one scenario that challenges that notion that female officers or women officers are more patient and less fearful of subjects, and that would be the Oklahoma shooting. Oklahoma officer, I forget her name, is Betty. Goodness, my mind is slipping me. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, police Betty Shelby. Okay, and she used the exact same, defense, that I was in fear for my life. And so what you're having is a scenario where, you don't have many women officers who are out on the streets to begin with. 26% of all police personnel, according to the FBI, are women. And so the next thing to look at is, of those 26% that are women, how many of them are actually out in the field? Because you have police officers who have, non-field roles. And so that can also impact that situation where less women are using deadly force. But I do think the common denominator is the way that policing has been, the culture has been, and the way that use of force has been taught, and the law that exists that allows officers to be able to use force to the degree that they objectively, subjectively feel is necessary. And I think that that's the problem, is that we should not be allowing officers to make these decisions, largely based on how they subjectively feel, whether they're in fear or not in fear. But there needs to be some real objective basis for their actions.
Do you think that the way that the police are policing is down to the way that they're now being trained to police, almost a military-styled policing enforcement?
Well, at most police academies, they're not training folks to be using military tactics or that sort of thing. It's a very basic level of training that you get in most academies. When you go up into the special weapons and tactics training units for officers who've been on the force for some time, then you get more of the militarized approaches to training. However, what you do see is you see a culture in policing that is being told to officers after they get out of police academies. That's one. You might have learned things in the academy, but this is how they're done on the streets, and how they're being trained and taught informally on the streets may have a more militaristic approach, and that's counterproductive, because the numbers really don't bear out that any of that type of militaristic approach is necessary all across this country. You realize there's 900,000 police officers in America. And if you pay attention to the mainstream narrative from Blue Lives Matter or Sheriff Dave Clark, you would think that there is a quote-unquote war on police. And so I want to ask you, how many people do you think are killed by felonious assault that are police officers every year?
I have no idea.
All right, so if there's a war, just take a wild guess. What do you think when you watch that kind of news and you hear those types of "there's a war on police"? We're out. There was a jackass that was on a video recently where he had his face all bloodied and he was telling the American people about the war that's going on against police. Just take a wild guess based on all of the propaganda and media stories that have been sort of aired by conservative groups and the NRA, their stupid ad that just came out. Take a wild guess on how many officers do you think are killed by felonious assault, based on what you kind of hear and see through the effects of media, through that lens of media. What do you think the number is?
You would have to start thinking in the terms of hundreds, possibly thousands.
Okay, good. I was looking for you to say hundreds, possibly thousands, right?
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you would think that based on that. The reality is, you go back over the last 15 to 20 years, less than on average, 150 officers lose their life in the line of duty. Okay, and I want you to take that that number into account when we look at there are 900,000 police officers. Okay, now wait, because there's more. Of those 150, and I challenge anybody who's listening, don't take my word for it. I want you to go and look this up yourself. I want you to go to www.od, as in David, as in Mary, P as in Paul.org. ODMP, the Officer Down Memorial page. While up until recently, through the actions of Black Lives Matter and other organizations, the federal government did not track police killings of citizens. And so we had no idea what the numbers were. There always, however, have been organizations that have tracked the numbers of officers killed in the line of duty. And so over the last few years, you can go back, 150 officers have died in the line of duty. Now, I just want to give you the shocker, okay? And here's the shocker. Though 150 of those deaths have occurred and those are in the line of duty, there's nothing, everybody that's lost a life, it's horrible, okay? But last year, 145 men and women lost their lives during the line of duty. Of those 145, only 63 of them were lost to gunfire.
Wow.
Okay? Only 63 of them were lost to gunfire. The way that officers die, on average, around 50 officers a year will lose their life to gunfire. Another third generally falls into heart attacks and health-related issues. And another third will fall into the automobile vehicle crash scenarios. So when you look at the breakdowns, what you're really seeing is that when it comes to bad guys killing police officers, that only about 50 to 65 people per year lose their life out of 900,000. So that's what your war on police looks like. Now, let me give you another eye-opening reality that you will never see this through the lens of our mainstream media. Black men do not kill police officers at the frequency that white men do. More white, so the narrative of the war on police goes, there's a bunch of black people. The reason why this officer feared for his life is because it's a black subject, and he feared for his life because black people are more violent and they're prone to commit more violence against police officers. That is a mischaracterization completely of the facts. The reality is that of those police shootings, 65% of them, I think it's 65% of them, were done by white people.
I'm just one second, Jonathan, because
okay.
Looking at what I'm looking at here, 68 deaths in 2017, right?
Right.
Of which only 25 are by gunfire.
That's correct. That's
16 by automobile crash.
Oh, you went to the site.
I'm there.
Yeah. So this is what I tell people: go out and really, and this is why we need organizations like the NAAPB. We need NAAPB to counteract the foolishness of Blue Lives Matter and the foolishness of NRA, because they're not giving the American people the real truth. The real truth of the matter is policing is not as dangerous as we have allowed these myths to be propagated for folks to believe. Policing is a dangerous job. It is not as dangerous as it is told to be. I bet you over in England, the officers over in England don't think that policing is that as dangerous as America makes it out to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's meant to, keep this dichotomy going of, inside the communities, the divisions going between blacks and whites. And so, us versus them, everything in America is binary. We got the Democrats on one side and the Republicans on the other, and so it's going to be cops versus Black Lives Matter. The reality is that there are a lot of great cops that are out there, but we're telling America that there's some war on cops. And so therefore all the good cops need to be, we got to support our people because there's a war on cops. So we need Americans to support our people because there's a war on cops. But so I want you to just look at that number and then look at the number done by The Guardian newspaper. It's called, the project is called The Counted. And you can go to The Counted by The Guardian. And they keep an accurate tracking of how many people have been killed by police. so
yeah,
far.
I've actually posted that for the last 2 years.
Yeah, and so we see that in 2016, the number is 1,093. Wow. Yeah, and the percentages. 2.9% of them are white. Uh, this is not surprising. 10.13% of them are Native Americans, and this is if you think that black people catch it, the Native Americans catch it almost twice at the rate that black people catch it.
No, we've come across that. In fact, we've done a lot of work with Native Americans on this show as well.
Yeah, and so they're suffering literally in silence. Most organizations don't even recognize the sufferings that they're going through, and they've been exposed to sort of the structural racism as long as black folks have, and as probably even longer, but as strong folks have been. And so we see that their end result is that they're almost they're largely marginalized by the government.
When you balance that out, 68 killed, 68 cops killed this year, and 1,093 people killed by cops last year. This seems to be a very imbalanced war.
Let's stop calling it a war altogether, because it's not a war. If you were I love where I live. There's this. Have you ever had a blue crab to eat?
No.
Okay. Well, they love blue crabs around here in Maryland, in Virginia. Sits on the Chesapeake Bay. But if you were a crabber, right, and your job was to every day go out on the high waters of the Chesapeake Bay, and you were a crabber, wouldn't you expect that you might get bitten by a crab every now and then?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So isn't it preposterous to think that we could send 900,000 police officers out into the American society and they never ever be assaulted by police officers? That's just crazy to think, right? But to characterize what's happening amongst police in America as an assault on or a war on policing is just flatly not true. It's a mischaracterization meant to further divide people, and it creates a situation where rational people cannot have a conversation about how we can put laws in place, how we can put policies in place so that the policing is done to a standard that we can at least be proud of, and that we can at least accept in American society.
You're quite right. We shouldn't be calling it a war.
No, we shouldn't be calling it one.
But when you look at the amount of individuals that are being killed on the streets by the police, how do you stop the community from not seeing it as a war?
No. There's a war on the society by the police. They're calling it a war of their damn selves. I'm saying there's not a war on by society on police. There's not a war on police initiated by society. That's their characterization.
Right.
So I think we could definitely say, since we're in the thousands on officers killing citizens, that they have been prosecuting a war against society, right? But this narrative that there is a war against the police by society is wholly and flatly not true.
Okay, so that's a flat line, right? That's the line out right there. We can actually see the line going right down the middle and which side you stand on. So for most people, the best way to stay safe is to become a law enforcement officer.
Well, I still want to acknowledge that there are hundreds of thousands of honorable, acceptable police.
Yeah, agree.
Okay,
absolutely agree with you.
And so I want to put forth this notion that before we throw out the baby with the bathwater, why don't we do something to change the dirty bathwater? And that is, why don't we create laws that proscribe the conduct of bad officers to the point that they're held accountable for their actions. And we have not done that. We have not done that. As a culture.
Let's start talking about law. Now, last week on our show with Alex Salazar, and we had Lori Valdez with us. You may know of Lori as well.
Yes, activists in California.
Yeah.
Both of them are based in California, as a matter of fact.
So I had both of them on the show last week, and Lori Valdez said this: why not force the officers to pay for their own insurance, right? And each time they unlawfully kill an innocent person or whatever, their insurance increases to the point where they are no longer insurable. Would that not put more accountability on them for them to be able to control and discipline their own behaviors, as opposed to having their behaviors having to be directed for them? Because at this precise moment in time, I believe it's the state that foots the bill every time a rogue cop goes out and kills an innocent person.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that policy. The way that it's set up right now is that the state or the city indemnifies the officer, and they pay it out of their insurance, or some of them are self-insured, and so they pay it out of a large pot of money that ultimately is funded by the taxpayer. And so I think there is a level of skin in the game by the officer in the fact that he goes to work every day. But police officers want to be known, and police organizations want to be known as professionals. And so to take them to that level of professionalism, let's look at what we call professionals in other occupations in America: nurses, doctors, lawyers, health, even plumbers, right? Every single one of these professionals, where they have a state license of some sort, is required to carry some level of insurance to be out there doing whatever they do. When I become licensed as a lawyer, I will have to get some insurance for omissions and errors. And so officers should be required to carry some level of personal insurance. And you're absolutely right. The more of a risk that officer is, the higher his insurance rate should be, to the point where if he's a complete risk, not only should he not be employable, but his employment should hinge upon whether he is insurable. Yeah. So that if he is not insurable, he is not employable. And so that's just and the other thing is your rate can go down with the more training that you get. Your rate can go down with the more years that you have without any deadly force encounters or any use of force complaints. Just like we pay drivers who we reward drivers with lower insurance rates who do not have any DUIs and do not have any tickets, we can reward those officers in like manner. So that way you don't penalize the good officers and you do punish the bad officers.
And that to me just sounds like a good recipe. So let's talk about law, Jonathan. Mm-hmm. This is going to be the whole concept of the show. I've really, I felt like we needed to get into a bit of this stuff so that we can get some sort of an understanding of what we're talking about here. Now we know what we're talking about. Let's talk about law so that the layman can understand what is law in its basic term.
Law is, in its basic term, social constructs that we put together to determine what is acceptable or unacceptable in our societies. They are words written down that communicate the values of a society. So that's all they are in their very basic understanding. They're just ways that we choose to set the conditions in society. There are a lot of examples of laws going back all the way to the Code of Hammurabi. But so what we do is we say as a society, this particular set of this conduct is acceptable, this conduct is unacceptable. And we write a law that proscribes unacceptable conduct, and it penalizes the person who does unacceptable conduct, unacceptable things. And so that is it in its I guess a real basic understanding.
Yeah, no, we're going to go there. We're going to dig. So now that we understand what law is, who's responsible? Who's responsible for laying down or preparing or introducing the law? That law.
Okay. Well, in America, We operate under a federalism system. In other words, we have a federal government, and we also have state governments that operate not independently, but almost like in unison. Each state government is their own sovereignty, okay? But they have come to an agreement through the Constitution of how they're going to interact and how they're going to interact with the federal government. And the federal government has a broad range of powers, but it is largely constricted by what is in the Constitution. And one of those areas that is not in the Constitution in terms of a function is that of policing. Policing is largely a state issue, a state function. States set the laws for policing. Okay, if the law is in your state that police officers are not allowed to wear guns, there will be police officers in that state with no guns. The feds can only incentivize local police departments to do things through funding mechanisms that they have. They cannot really mandate that police do anything because policing is a state function. It falls up underneath the state's authority and jurisdiction. And so you have this duality of jurisdictions. On the federal level, there is law that is in place that implicates how a state can police you, okay? Police its citizens. So the 14th Amendment sets up the basis for due process. It basically prescribes states from doing certain things to citizens. The 14th Amendment, in its basic language, it reads that all persons born and naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction are citizens. And the key language in the 14th Amendment that really has to do with how a state polices you is that no. Bear with me 1 second. I'm losing my voice.
You need a break. You need some water.
Yeah, that no state will make a law that hang on 1 second.
Okay. You okay? You okay to carry on?
Yeah. I just had to get some water. Yeah, that no state would make or enforce any law that shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And it's that language there that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That sets up the protections that you are given. In other words, a state cannot just arbitrarily choose to do with your life, take your property, and take your freedom without having some due process. And then there's been a bunch of constitutional interpretations about what is due process of law and how much process is actually due, and so forth. And so when you look at these concepts on a broad basis, that is the law that sets up how much policing can be done on you and how policing is to be done on you. And they're very simplistic in their language. It doesn't really say a whole lot there, does it? It just kind of just says that, no state is going to deprive anybody of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Most citizens don't know what due process of law is. Most laws that are set up out there, most people who want to talk about due process of law, when they finally do come across this, they don't understand the constitutional interpretations that have happened up until this point to give us the law as it sits right now. And so this is one where you see these lawsuits that are coming on behalf of citizens that are suing police departments. They're suing under Title 42, Section 1983 of the U.S. Code, and it allows them to sue their state when there is a violation of their civil rights, 14th Amendment and Fourth Amendment. So that's primarily the law as regards to constitutionally speaking in a broad base. Now, getting more specific, okay, so if we talk about what process is due, and we want to look at a constitutional basis or a constitutional construction of what's due, then we should look at the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment, a lot of people, think about the Fourth Amendment when it comes to searching their house. They think about the Fourth Amendment when it comes to seizing people, but they do not think about the Fourth Amendment and its implications when it comes to police beating and shootings. But the Fourth Amendment is your primary protection, and it has been interpreted through the courts as your primary protection as opposed to the due process clause of the 14th Amendment. So the U.S. Constitution as it sits right now doesn't explicitly guarantee citizens the right to not be beaten by the police.
Sorry, repeat that again. Just say that again.
Yeah, the U.S. Constitution does not explicitly guarantee our citizens the right to not be beaten by the police. The U.S. Constitution does not say that the police will not beat you. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution simply says that individuals in the United States will not be subjected to an unreasonable seizure by the government.
Wow.
Okay, and so inside that cloud that I just gave you,
can I just say this? What that law actually says is that you do not have the right not to be beaten by the police, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So in other words, the Constitution does not explicitly say that the police can't beat you. The Constitution just says that you will not be subject to an unreasonable seizure. So the question that should pop up in everybody's mind, well, what the hell is a reasonable seizure?
Wow.
Right?
Now that still has me slightly dumbstruck.
Yeah. So yeah, if you look at the Fourth Amendment, if you read the entire text of the U.S. Constitution, it does not say that the police or the government won't beat you. It just simply says that you will not be subject to an unreasonable seizure. And so the courts have struggled with this notion of, and the U.S. Supreme Court has struggled with this notion of, well, what's reasonable, right? And so that's what we're seeing is this tension between what is reasonable and what is unreasonable. Was it reasonable for Philando Castile to be shot by Geronimo Yanez in the fashion that he was shot in? Most citizens would say no. The police would say maybe. The courts have said yes, it is reasonable.
And the thing is that they find ways to justify it. So
because the law is not concrete enough. And so if we go into what the law, where the law is and how we got to, this standard that allows this right now, it's based on a case from 1989, I believe it is. It's called Graham versus Connor. And you can look that up. I'm going to dig up the site here for Graham versus Connor. Graham versus...
You say Graham, is that G-R-A-M?
Yeah, Graham versus Connor. It can be found at 490 U.S. 386, right? 490 space U.S. space 386. It's a 1986 case. So, Graham was a diabetic who was having an insulin reaction. And he asked a friend to drive him to a convenience store to purchase some orange juice to counteract the onset of this insulin reaction. When he got to the store, he saw how many folks were inside the store ahead of him, and he says, I can't wait for this. So he hurried right back out the store, and he asked his friend to drive him to another friend's house, right? Officer Connor was watching this interaction of this man enter the store and exit the store, and he made an investigative stop, ordering the folks to stop and get out the car. right? When the when Mr. Graham was explaining to them, when the friend was explaining to him he's having an insulin reaction and so forth, they still handcuffed Mr. Graham to the point where he suffered some physical damages, and so Mr. Graham later sued this officer and that police department, and the U.S. court. This went all the way to the Supreme Court, and so our understanding of what is acceptable use of force is based on an interaction of an officer, a very minimal interaction of an officer using force, not deadly force, on a subject who is having an insulin reaction. And the standard that came out of that is something called the objective reasonable standard. And that is, officers are allowed to use force, right, that a reasonable officer would use in the same situation. And so it is sort of, they look at what is known to the officer at that time. So this gives a wide window for officer discretion. And the problem with that is that officers are there are a lot of parameters that should be, there should be more process that is due an individual besides besides going all the way to deadly force. So we've taken the Graham standard, the standard articulated in Graham, and applied it across the board for use of force, and saying, you know what, if it was objectively reasonable, it should be okay without anything more. And
that was in 1989, wasn't it?
Yeah, that case was in 1989.
Yeah, 89.
And so we have a case that's almost 30 years old, and how our process of law over here is done is there's two ways to get laws put into effect. One is going through our state legislatures or through the federal government and getting them put on the books, literally, okay? Or another is court-interpreted law, as we have in the situation here of Graham, and that's a long process. We have to wait for the right case to come up. We have to determine whether the federal court will hear it. We have to determine whether the U.S. Supreme Court will take it up, to be heard. And so it's a long process, and we need to be looking at ways that we can create laws faster, and that is done through organizing and mobilizing. And we're not there, and this is sort of what some of the work that we're trying to do with NAAPB is. The police unions in America are organized and mobilized. The NRA is organized and they can mobilize, but citizens are really still ambivalent about the police accountability issue. All right. On one hand, you have a lot of citizens who say, "Well, I know it's bad," and then they say, "But those officers are at war. They've got a real tough job to do," And so you have some.
Here's the thing, Jonathan, and I think this is where most of us struggle. All right, especially here in the UK, and those of us who sympathise with what we witness and see taking place out there in America to our brothers and sisters at the hands of law enforcement. So you get a guy who goes out there and the victim is shot, killed, injured, maimed, whatever. All right. So that's the scenario, right? And the officer says, "Well, I thought he was reaching for his gun, so I pulled out mine, and because I had my gun out anyway. I told him to stop. He made a movement. I thought he was reaching for something, and I thought my life was threatened. So I fired. I took him out. I felt it was my life or his. Okay. Now I get that, because that's you're a law enforcement officer. You've told somebody to stop. We're living in a world now where not everybody listens to the law or respects the law. You have people that won't respect the law, full stop, and will do anything to get away. I get all of that, right? But when it is found, when it's proven beyond doubt that this individual was causing, and there's been several cases where it has been proven beyond doubt that this individual caused no threat, was no threat, in fact was not doing anything like the officers have tried to claim. The CCTV footage, the dash cam footage, the body cam footage have all contradicted the officer's version of events and proven that this guy has actually acted in a very haphazard way. Right? We're still not seeing accountability or anyone taking responsibility or consequences for the actions thereof. So where is the law going wrong here?
That's a very good question. On the federal level, the law sets a very high threshold for somebody to be charged. Okay. On the state level, the law, the way that it's written, sets up an escape valve based on the jury's understanding of what is acceptable and what is not. Okay. So on one level, the feds have set it up so that they don't really have to get involved unless it's really apparent situation. Title 18 U.S. 241 and 242 are the federal standards that are implicated when police officers either conspire to deny somebody their civil rights under color of law, or they deny somebody their civil rights under color of law individually without a conspiracy. When you read the law under 18 USC 242, what you find out is that law has been interpreted as and again, it's judicial interpretation, has been interpreted as a specific intent crime. And what that means is that not only did the officer had to intend to shoot the individual, but he had to do it with the specific intention of denying him a civil right, a protected civil right. Or he denied him, he shot him for the reasons that were unconstitutional. In other words, he shot him because he was black. He shot him because he was a female, or shot him because he was, for religious purposes. And so that second prong of shooting for a specific intent is almost impossible at times to prove. It has been done, but it's been, it's far and few between. Okay, so. On the state level, what you're seeing is the charging of either murder or manslaughter. Okay, and then when the juries are instructed, the instructions are so amorphous that the average individual. And I say the average individual because I've even heard some black folks, tell me that they were okay with the Yanez shooting of Castillo based on the stuff that was presented in the court until they then heard or saw the video. Okay. And when I saw the video, they were like, I don't know how those people could have not convicted. So you can have a situation where jurors are not understanding what the law is, and so therefore, like in the Castillo situation, they basically, or you can even have situations where jurors don't care what the law is and they can nullify. I believe
let's just go back to the Castillo case because one of the original assumptions that was made and being branded about at the time, because we had this live. I had it being streamed live when his girlfriend was streaming it live on Facebook because it was sent to me live, and so I stopped everything that I was doing and I watched what went on, and so did half the world, so to speak, because this went viral, right? But shortly afterwards, he was meant to look like a guy who had just robbed a bank. But everything about him contradicted the description of the person that they were looking for.
And that's the thing. That's the thing, is that this officer, that bullshit about I was pulling him over because I thought he was the robbery suspect. That is absolute bullshit. If you were doing that and you thought that was a robbery suspect, he wouldn't have been so casual going up to that car.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
He would have done that pullover as a felony.
And not only that, he would have been calling for backup immediately, because this person was already suspected to be a felon, an armed robber who's prepared to kill to get away. So you're not going to go and tackle that on your own, because and then you're going to go and approach that guy, knowing that this guy's got the mentality to kill.
That is that whole explanation was an ad hoc post-incident rationalization. That was something that he offered out there. I was scared because I thought this was the bank robber. Well, if you thought this was the bank robber, you sure did skip a whole lot of steps.
Yeah, you'd have grabbed onto the radio. I've got the suspect in my sights. I'm following. He's in this vehicle. This is a registration number. But be careful, because there's a female sitting alongside him, and we're not sure if it's an accomplice or what. Right. Yeah, all of these things would have been put in place.
Absolutely right.
Now,
absolutely right.
In every job of work, there is what's known as protocol, right?
Right.
Standard protocol. I'm an engineer. We build the fuel tanks for Jaguar Land Rover, and we build the fuel tanks for the Jeeps the Army uses, right down to the Range Rovers that you see on the streets that the general public drive around in, right? But for every single process of the manufacturing and production line, we have what's called SOPs. And the SOP is a standard operating procedure, right? And any time anything goes wrong, the first question that is asked is, did he follow standard operating procedure? Right? And if you haven't followed standard operating procedure, then you're in big trouble. If you've had an accident, you're operating a machine, right? And you cut your finger off. Right? Now, by rights, you're entitled to the insurance, the sick leave, and all the support and sympathy that the company will give you for injuring yourself while at work. But the first question by health and safety will still be, was he following standard operating procedure? And if he wasn't, right, there's a possibility, A, he will get no sick pay, and B, there's going to be a disciplinary which actually could get him dismissed from his job. Now, how many times have you got an officer not operating in standard operating procedure, the protocol which is set to them, by the standards of being a law enforcement officer, right? And then something goes tragically wrong, where someone loses their life, or there's a serious accident, or even an officer ends up losing his life because of another officer's stupidity. Right? When it's found that they've not followed standard operating procedure, because this officer with Philando Castile did not follow standard operating procedure, how are they still protected? How are they still allowed to? What can be done? There's so many questions that I've got coming out of me right now, because it just sounds so ludicrous.
There's a doctrine called qualified immunity that protects police officers from lawsuits when they're acting in good faith. And so put some quotes and put the parentheses to the side on good faith, right? If they've set this doctrine up so that, people aren't scared to become police officers. But we've created situations where that can be abused because officers know that there's no penalty. Most officers know that there's going to be no penalty whatsoever. I'm going to send you a sort of understanding of what qualified immunity is on the text, but on the chat box there. But once you understand sort of this doctrine, you will see that officers are not held accountable because they're protected. The other thing is that the way that the law is written, you have two channels. You civilly sue if your rights have been violated, or the state will choose whether they want to prosecute or not prosecute based on the criminal law that is available to them. In most of these situations, you will find that officers simply lie on police reports, but they're not charged with making a false statement. If you make a false statement to the police in the United States, you will be criminally charged for that. Okay. In in this situation here with Mr. Steele's death, right? This officer, if you look at the law as regarding use of force in the state of Minnesota, you will see that this officer did break the law in regarding use of force. Okay, so officers are given immunities and passes that are becoming abused now.
You going back to Philando Castile, and I don't want to just keep going over the same thing all the time.
No, absolutely. Let me just tell you this. After the Philando Castile trial was over, I was at a loss for words because of, I really thought that this was going to be the one that we saw on national TV, that a jury, but it proves the racial bias in America. Okay, let me give you. There are two juries in the last year that have acquitted officers of apparently bad stuff, and those jurors, I don't know how they could sleep at night because, quite honestly, the facts were just so plain that, and I don't know why a judge would actually thank them for their service, knowing that they just made a mockery of our entire justice system. That was the juror in the Michael Slager shooting down in South Carolina.
Yeah.
They were not able to convict him. And this shooting here in the Philando Castile case, they were not able to convict him. We want to act like jurors are infallible. Like the jurors are a representation of America. If we have racists in America, we have bigots in America, so we'll have bigots and racists inside our jury boxes. And that is not justice. And so, there's just been a situation that situation just took place where, this jury chose to ignore what everybody else was seeing on this video in both of those situations and let him go. There was an officer down in Texas with Sandra Bland who completely instigated a traffic stop and, took it up to a use of force level that was inappropriate and that resulted in her death later on. He lied on his police report. The prosecutor chose to simply just drop the charges. And, he didn't have to, I don't even know if he had to give up his policing license in the state of Texas. That was the stipulations on that plea agreement. But, I could go on for hours about, this, but I really want to talk about how we organize to fix it.
Okay. I was gonna just mention one more thing.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Before we head off, because I know you're chomping at the bit to talk about how we fix it. The other big case, because they had another opportunity before Philando Castile to set the record straight, and they missed that one as well, and that was Laquan McDonald.
Oh, but it's not done yet.
No. I mean, he's now been re-indicted on 16 new charges, I believe.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But that was almost done and dusted. They're about to get. I mean, I know there's new charges, but you got to remember. And again, here in the UK, and I'm speaking from a UK perspective simply because we don't actually we never really got. I've been doing this show for 2 to 3 years now, so I'm very much up to speed with what's going on with police brutality and unlawful killings out there. But we don't get it on UK news. In fact, the first story we got in the whole 3 years that I've been doing this show was when the Chief Justice ordered the police to release the Laquan McDonald video, and that news went worldwide, right? Oh. That was the first time the UK got a snippet of what was going on in America as far as unlawful killing and police brutality was concerned, right? They missed the boat. We were the first. This show was the first to go out on the Sandra Bland case, worldwide. We hit the floor running with that one, worldwide. I've had Tamir Rice's mother on this show. I've had John Crawford's father on this show. But the UK as a whole, we don't get that news. The first time we ever got any of it was the Laquan McDonald, where the Chief Justice ordered the police to release the tapes, and that's like a 2-year-old case.
Right.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say, when I come back to all of this, the reason why I get into it is we have a large audience in the UK, but I know most of our audience is out stateside and worldwide. But it's so that our audience, our listeners, can get a real understanding of how we've got to where we are. You know, because when Philando Castile came out, when that one, because that did go worldwide, because the girlfriend was streaming that live on Facebook.
Right.
Had it not been for the girlfriend streaming that live on Facebook, we would have never got that story. I would have.
Right.
My show would have done it, but the UK wouldn't have. The world wouldn't have got it.
You know, this is, man. You know, to combat what we're talking about, we really have to be of a singular mind that we should be working together to inform the world when we have these incidences, so they can see the need for comprehensive criminal justice reform. One of the things that sort of shocked me here in the United States is the level of fragmentation that we have, even amongst activists and social justice organizations and individuals, and everybody's working for the same goal, but we're working in 1,000 different directions. And you know, it's you know, if somebody wanted to go to the National Association Against Police Brutality's Facebook page, as soon as we get it, as soon as we get information about something that's taken place, we'll put it up. We'll put it up and we'll share it with the world. We want to be known as a source. What we saw during our first year was there are people at times that try to game that system. There are people that literally contact you because they want to be the next celebrity victim or victim's family. And so we've kind of guarded against that by not really trying to be everything to everybody. But we want to be a source for information. We want to be a source to help people tell their stories of their family and loved ones when they've been impacted by police misconduct and police brutality and killings. So it's a very difficult balancing act. But I think collectively, through working with organizations like yourself, and there's a gentleman over here, Brother Carlos, down in Florida with PNAC. It's Photography is Not a Crime. Carlos Miller. We can do this. We can really do this. We have to stop depending on. We absolutely must stop depending on mainstream media to tell our stories, and that's just the fact. We have to stop depending on that. They don't tell it accurately, and they only tell stories that they see will drive their narrative. That and I again, when I was talking about this in the beginning, there are white people that deal with this issue as well, but the media barely ever puts any of the white stories on TV. Okay, and because of that lack of coverage causes, in our biased community of America, that causes a lot of people to see this issue as solely a black issue, and they're not. Let's just face it, America is a very insensitive place when it comes to black suffering. Yeah. The world is an insensitive place when it comes to black suffering. So as long as it's a black thing, it's okay. But the moment the white blood is spilled, you're finding that people are waking up and saying, I think the police are out of control. And, my response to that is sometimes, no shit. We've been telling you that for the last 30, 40, 50 years, But as long as, again, as long as black people are the only ones saying it, it really doesn't have, quote unquote, any validity. But you let somebody white say it, and now all of a sudden there's a problem. But we're still not organized, and so therefore the problem's not going to go away. Okay,
so that's kind of about as far as we can take that for now, because I know there's a part that you really want to get into, and so that's what we're looking at. That's what we face with. We're not happy with it. It's definitely not as we believe it should be. How do we go about fixing it, Jonathan?
Well, the first thing is based on our first part of the discussion. All of these conditions exist because of the laws that exist. Laws either allow things to occur or they disallow things to occur. And in this situation, we do not have strong enough laws that prescribe the conduct of police officers when they do bad things. And so therefore, we need to create the law at the state and local level. And, and yes, if we can get it done at the federal level, I'm all for that. There'll be a lot of people who say, well, we need to be doing something. And here's my federal piece of legislation. There was a woman who, for, my second year in law school, she was telling me about her federal piece of legislation that she had drafted. And I respected her for trying to do that. My thing is that if you take anything over across that river into Washington, D.C., and you want to talk about getting it passed, and it is a polarizing issue, you might as well forget it. Even if it's a great idea, they're not coming together on it, okay? And so my approach and my thought pattern is that we need to be working at the local and state level to get laws put on the books that address these issues. Laws like requiring police officers to have insurance. Laws like creating a mandatory minimum sentence for officers who lie on police reports, okay? Laws like requiring de-escalation with unarmed subjects, right? Laws like requiring officers to use non-deadly force with unarmed subjects, right? There are myriad. Your country proves there's ways to handle people who are unarmed without resorting to deadly force.
Do you know we also have a good record of apprehending individuals who are armed?
Yeah. Man, your folks over there, and this is the thing, here in America, we're just okay killing folks, largely because most of the folks that were being killed in a percentage-wise at one point and still are, were black people, okay? And so all that's happened over the last couple of years is nothing's really changed except that we're able to now see it live on Facebook, okay? This stuff has been going on for many years. And so how do we really organize? Well, the National Association Against Police Brutality is an organization that's set up to empower citizens, to educate citizens, to hold police accountable. And the way we do that is we educate you on the law, the way that the law sits, so that you can see the need for changing the law. Once you see the need, then you should become empowered. You want to become empowered? You go out and you start organizing your people, and you talk about the same thing that we're talking about. The law, how it currently sits, and what it needs to look like. And when we organize, we're not organizing for the purposes of just marching. We're organizing for the purposes of taking politicians out of office that choose to ignore police accountability. If this issue were gun rights, you see politicians respond to the NRA. You see politicians respond to police unions. Why? Because they're organized. And when they show up, they know that those people mean business. Those people are voting. We're not going to get substantive change or civil rights protections given back to us or any of the change in the criminal justice system unless we're organized and willing to hold elected leaders accountable. And that's just the truth of the matter. And so what I learned over the last 3 years with NAAPB is that there's a lot of competitiveness amongst social justice advocates and groups and organizations. And everybody wants to be their own independent thing. I get that. The reality is that none of us are going to get any place unless we actually collaborate and work together. And to that end, we have put together, and I know this to be true because a friend of mine, when he looked at it, he's like, man, I don't think anybody's done anything like that. You can go to preventpolicebrutality.org. We have a platform that allows us to register volunteers and people who are interested in this fight. It doesn't cost you a dime. All you're doing is showing interest. We're able to then know we've got to call up a march. We want to organize to get community oversight of policing in a particular area all the way down to a county. Our system allows us to do that. We don't do petitions with iPetitions or Move On or any of those others because they don't let us have access to the data to the specificity that we need to mobilize, right? So we created our own online petition software, right? And we have these types of resources. The thing is that one individual or even 5 individuals can't do it, but 100, 200, 300 people working together can. organizations that are out there that are reputable, that are really trying to bring families together. Mothers Against Police Brutality. Colette Flanagan, she lost a son. There are folks, let me see who else, Sipke Fernandez with Together We Stand. These are all organizations that are worthy and that are credible. You have Uncle Bobby with his organization, CFIS. These folks are doing things. But then you have people that are out there, right, that have literally wasted the resources and the energy of people over the last 5, 6, 10 years even going back. And they haven't done anything. And when I say they haven't done anything, all they've done is gone around with a bullhorn and a microphone and talk about, I want police, I want justice for, and then they name off a whole bunch of other people. It's time to get serious about police accountability. That's going to require sitting down at the table, coming up with an effective strategy, implementing that strategy. And watch this. It's not about sitting around just talking about this stuff in academic stratosphere stuff that nobody can understand. It's about really sitting down and saying, here's our plan, here's how we're going to remove this politician because they're not really about police accountability. They haven't even respected us enough to return a phone call. That's what needs to happen at the local level. That's what needs to happen at the state level. And then you will start to see people come together and say, you know what, this issue is important enough for us to change. Otherwise, in the next generation, you'll see more killings because people are becoming more and more desensitized to the killings, and officers are becoming more and more desensitized to preservation of life. So my suggestion is that folks go to www.preventpolicebrutality.org and register. If you're an individual, you can register. Your organization, you can register. If you're a law student, we need your help. If you're a lawyer, we need your help. And if you're in college or K through 12 system, even a high schooler, we want your help. We want to build so much awareness and so much organization that we begin to change this dynamic. What we do with that information is we reach out and call you, and then we start asking you to tell other people about the organization, and about the policies, and about the projects that we have that are going on. The very first project that we did is called the National Police Incident Reporting Platform. We do not believe that citizens should be reporting their incidents of police misconduct to the police. They have a conflict of interest in resolving that issue. They should report it to us. We will put it in a database. We're able to see if there is a pattern or a practice that has been established out of that particular officer or out of that particular agency. We are able to get you to legal, spiritual, and wellness help if you need it. And that's the best way to do it. They had an officer out in Oklahoma named Daniel Holtzbach who raped like 5 or 6 women, most of them African American. I think all of them were African American. Well, the way that he was able to get away with that is because those women were scared to report that to a police agency, right? You can report it to us. We're a non-government organization. We will put you in contact with a civil rights attorney. If you're looking for a civil rights attorney, we have attorneys that are registered on our system. You can simply just go right there. You don't have to. We get no commission from the attorneys whatsoever. We just want people to get to people who are serious about helping them. So if you're looking for a civil rights attorney, you can go to wesuebadcops.com. That's wesuebadcops.com. And those are attorneys who are listed on that page. Which brings me to another point. And I want to make sure that folks understand this. I call them the three folks who come to see you when you have a police brutality situation, a police incident of misconduct, and it's known. And you can find this this is one of the constant questions that we get asked. Well, what should I do if I believe I'm a victim of police misconduct? Well, the number one rule I tell people is don't call the police first. The police have a vested interest in protecting their institution and their officer. Okay? Contact the NAAPB or an experienced and licensed civil rights attorney in your area, right? You need somebody looking out for your interest. Next, I tell people, don't speak to the media until you speak with your attorney. Anything you say might adversely be construed or misrepresented in the media and affect your chances of getting justice. Next, I tell people, don't speak to the local community activists. There are people who are coming out of the woodwork as soon as an incident happens, and there are some activists who have sued members of victims for money from their settlements. That's right.
Wow.
In Atlanta, there is a minister who went to a victim's family, right? She was shot and killed by the police. The minister went to the family and said, I'm here to help. He helped them, quote unquote, and he felt entitled to part of their settlement, and he sued on their behalf, sued them for some of that settlement. He won. There was a settlement with him. So there are three people that may come knocking on your door. That would be a media person, a community activist, and it may even be an attorney. And I tell you, most civil rights attorneys that have experience in this business don't have to knock on anybody's door to get their business. And so, you want to find somebody who is experienced in civil rights. You don't want just any attorney representing your family, because if they don't have the experience in this is a highly complex area of the law. And without that experience and without that capacity to be able to handle a case, they can mess up your case. Okay?
Here's the thing. Talking about changing the law, how real is it to actually getting the laws changed?
Okay, so that's a very good question. When I was out with some Black Lives Matter activists at one point, they were like, "We don't want to talk about that. We've been there." Every iteration of the law that we've seen in America has happened through blood, sweat, and tears. I can answer that question by saying this: at one point in America, slavery was legalized, then it was not legal. At another point in America, separate but equal was legalized, but then it was made not legal. At one point in America, it was illegal for a black person to read or to get married. And now that is not the case. And so what it takes organizing across organizing across a myriad of divisions and lines. And it takes serious work. The LGBTQ community was able to get marriage equality after many decades of fighting, right? But it took that work. It is a completely achievable goal that we can get laws put on the books that will impact and reduce police brutality. And I believe that with all my heart, because there are communities out there that are starting to reform their policing. There are communities out there that are starting to reform their criminal justice system. But there has not been a large concerted effort to really change the conversation across the country.
You see, because I'm in agreement with you there, because I've been speaking to a lot of people about individuals who are really active in trying to change the way that we see police or policing is done in our communities today. But without actually putting laws in place that enforce the police to behave and conduct themselves in that way, we're not going to move from here.
That's right. So when we first started with NAAPD, ours has always been, let's change the law. That was, our first graphics that we put out, let's change the law. And, to a large extent, there was pushback inside, there was pushback. I don't want to name groups or organizations, but, groups and organizations over the last 3 years, some of them have been divisive to the point where it completely fragmented out any progress that was going to be made. You had some groups that says, I don't want any white people involved. You had some groups that said, you know what, you all are too academic. You're not out here in these streets protesting. Then you had some groups that said, listen, you people are too old. Y'all had your chance to fix things. Then you had some groups that said, listen, we don't want you in here because you're talking about praying and we talking about slave. We're secular and you all are believers. And then you had, so I could just keep on going down how these groups sort of like, divided up their own camp and expected to achieve change on their own, and that's been part of the problem with some of these movements.
And that's been part of the problem with all of the movements, with everything that we've ever tried to achieve and accomplish across the years, is the division and the propaganda that keeps us separate, that stops us from uniting and speaking with one voice that could actually make a difference in the place that we are.
Absolutely. That's I've been frustrated with it because I see, you see this paradigm setting up where you have elite, leaders inside the movement that, they'll get paid $20,000 or $30,000 to show up at a speaking engagement, but you can't get them to show up to help, rally people to come together for a voting drive to get people, elected or unelected. You have, there's all of these individualized agendas, and really we have this condition that still has existed from the time that Darren Wilson shot Michael Brown to right now, and any of it has changed, and we have to get serious about changing it.
Absolutely, and the change has got to start somewhere. Where do you see the change beginning, Jonathan?
I see the change beginning in the K through 12 system. I say this, we have to start in middle school. We have to start, there are folks who are conscious who are our age. That's great. But there's a disconnect between the generation. There's, the races. And so we have to start with the next generation of saying, hey, police aren't bad, but you want to make sure that your individual rights are protected, and here's how you do it. And once we start telling that generation, this is how you do it, you change the laws to create situations where police are held accountable, then that'll be done. That'll be a serious issue with them, and they'll move to getting that done.
Over the last few years, you have had that many unlawful killings or incidents involving or relating to police brutality that there's almost a desensitizing of this kind of thing in the news now. So for you guys out there in the States, it's every news bulletin, or it's every Facebook page, or every social media issue, almost every protest, and you guys also haven't been able to get the newsworthy stations on board to support, because both Fox and CNN seem to be an enemy to change. So unless we get a new media force come into the picture, how are we going to get the media on the side so that what they're actually portraying out there to the rest of the world is something that's more honest and favorable?
Man, I'm for us creating our own sources of media, and we will never control that media group, the mainstream media, to get that out there to the world. What we should be doing is like the Young Turks and some other independent news sources, and creating our own vehicles of media, like yourself. I think the longer that we listen to CNN, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, and Fox News, and those folks, the more ambivalent we'll become, because we're only being shown one side of the entire issue. And so, we have to create other sources for this. But those sources have to be trained journalists, and they have to be folks who will actually vet out a story to make sure that we're on page before we run out with it. Can't tell you how many times, we've gotten, hey, here, this just happened like literally 5 minutes ago, and then when you really get the whole story, hey, every shooting, I hate saying this, every time the police do shoot somebody, it's not bad. But, it's one of those situations where, we have to give some time for due diligence investigation to be done.
Here's the thing, right? It's a different concept, but on the same principle. The war in Syria had been going on for over 5 years now, 6 years, going on 6 years now. And the propaganda that's been coming out from Syria as to the reasons why this is going on there, and why all the fighting's going on and what's happening, all of that we were totally oblivious to. until a 9-year-old girl started to tweet. And this
Wow.
9-year-old girl got the attention of the world, with hundreds and thousands of followers quickly tuning in to her daily broadcast, which was very unprofessional,
Right.
very amateurish, but very real.
Right.
Right?
And that's exactly what it takes. I mean, that's exactly what it takes. It's like citizen journalism, and we may not even have one place where we get it all from. Like there might not be one place, because I don't believe in just like having one place, because they'll shut that one place down.
Yeah.
But definitely, that's the type of stuff that I'm talking about. You've probably presented on your show today more education than we have gotten in CNN, all those damn talking heads over the last year, about this issue, because they, they only want to present it according to their narrative.
I mean, some people might say that we only want to promote it according to our narrative, but for me, I just like to think that we're opening up the platform to truth and honesty.
Man, at least you're having a conversation about it. I mean a conversation that's, I'm attempting to inform. I mean, there are some guys out there that absolutely know this stuff way better than me. But in terms of the law and the constitutional issues that are there, but you're having a conversation. You're dedicating the time to educating citizens about what's happening. And if that's not being done on a lot of platforms, it's, what you do see on a lot of platforms is you do see people posting pictures and stuff. I mean, heck, we're guilty of it too sometimes. Or just throw up whatever the latest killing that just happened, and people will, click a like or hit a share. And the reality is that we've got to actually sit down and say, we're beyond liking and sharing. We want to get down to voting.
Yeah, and here's the thing: there's many times when there's a really serious issue, and I will post, because I do use social media quite a lot. I have a very large following, so I will do. But when it's a really serious issue, I actually tell them, I'll headline it. Don't just like this. Read this.
Yeah,
if it's a video,
it.
don't just like it. Watch it.
And share it. And
be
share it.
be
and
informed
share it.
by it. Sometimes people just hit the like button because of who's posting it, irrespective as to what the content of the post is. I don't want you to just like my post. Read it, and only like it if you agree with it. And if you agree with it, then do something.
And that's it. We've you see that apathy. I mean, like I had a post that went I think it was like 30,000 likes. And in the chain, I said, no, I'd like everybody to go ahead and register at www.preventpolicebrutality.org. It's totally free. We're trying to organize, and we might have got a couple hundred, maybe. But it's like, taking that next step. People aren't really interested in taking that next step. But watch and see if something ever happens to them or their family member.
And that's the unfortunate thing as well, is that most people don't actually to get the initiative to motivate themselves to move, unless it's personalized, unless it happens to them or somebody close to them.
That's right.
We've just had this issue with this fire in Grenfell Tower here in London, where the whole 15 blocks floors went up in flames because the government decided to make the place look pretty instead of safe, and hundreds of people were killed and hundreds more displaced and made homeless. And then you get to hear that there's been a whole catalogue of conversations that had been taking place that nobody was any the wiser for. This had been condemned, and now they found out that there are over 75 tower blocks with exactly the same unsafe cladding on their buildings, rendering all of these people. So when do we do something in our community? When do we do something in our society to change the outcome of the way? Do we have to wait until it falls on our doorstep, until one of us dies, before we say, well, something needs to happen here?
Yeah, it's brother. I think that the powers that are in power, folks that know stuff, how to do stuff, they really count on us being ambivalent and too busy to actually do stuff. we're getting ready to start so because we're busy, we can't give money. We can't even take the 30 seconds to give a pledge or whatever. One of our board members came up with a brilliant idea, right, to help fund NAAPB and some of the work that we're doing. And that is, we're going to be creating a company that sells stuff that we all use, toilet paper and toothpaste. And we're just asking families to buy your toilet paper and toothpaste from us. It'll be shipped directly to your house. You never have to. We have an app that's being created that, ask you, are you good on toilet paper? If you say no, it'll send you your next order, But the reality is that unless you make serving and helping and doing easy for people, most people won't do a damn thing. And that's just it.
And that really is the sad thing. And 9 times out of 10, people like to vociferously support something, but the moment you start asking for any kind of financial help or commitment, there they go. No, they had to go and ask for money, and and either they haven't got the money or they haven't got the time. Well, how can this thing matter to you if you're not prepared to commit yourself to it somehow?
Man, I want to bring you on. We're getting ready to start doing a live stream with NAAPB, and I want that from somebody else's perspective, because that question that you just asked right there, for me, it somewhat seems loaded that I would say that, but the truth of the matter is that is exactly the problem.
Well, the thing is, we're living in a world where people are beginning to get more confused and agitated, and unless the law changes, I have a real serious concern that the mood and the attitude of the ghetto will change. Vigilantes will rise up. Military-style community organizations will stand. And we're going to have some form of anarchy in our world unless we get some real legitimate change in law.
Those one bad scenario feeds the other bad scenario, which feeds the other bad scenario, and it becomes a symbiotic relationship, right? Unaccounted police brutality that goes unaccounted will produce brutality on police that will go unaccounted.
And here's the thing. One of the biggest organizations in the world is the church. And when it comes to human rights, the church is probably the biggest standing for human rights. And yet, in all of this unlawful killing and police brutality, there's very little showing from the church.
Man, I mess with you, boy. So my background is, I came up in the church, and I'm a believer, man, and man, there's going to be some march, in D.C. where 1,000 ministers are going to be marching. I want to know where those 1,000 ministers were when this stuff was going down a year and a half, 2 years ago, when young people all across this country were, man, oh wow.
There are ministers right across your country that are influential, powerful, and there's no bigger money making industry in America than the church. But I mean, most of the big preachers in America have been sued for one thing or another, tax evasion or financial dodging of some sort. I mean, they've all got private jets, for crying out loud.
Right.
And you're telling me that the people that are called to stand over God's people, when God's people are being trodden on, have got nothing to say on this matter?
Man, you saying a word to me. There's a brother who's we're getting ready to sit down and have us a face-to-face. His name is Reverend Jerome McQuarrie, and we're talking about what is the faith-based response to this? Where how can we really organize that? And I mean, maybe they're starting to come around, but their response to this point has been unsatisfactory completely, and they've had their head in the sands. You even put it like this: you even had some faith-based ministers who were getting on TV and talking about Black Lives Matter was a terrorist organization as well.
Yeah, but
So
I saw. You see, the thing is, we see that over here. Now,
yeah,
I'm not. I am a true believer, and for me, I walk by the grace of God and by the grace of God alone, and I struggle when I see people struggling around the world,
man,
and I don't hear the cry of the church,
gosh, man,
right?
man.
Um, I,
Oh,
s- I
man,
struggle when I see
man,
people burying their children,
it
mothers
takes the
burying their
energy
children,
out of us.
and, and,
Yes,
and the
man.
church is nowhere to be seen. I struggle when I see wars tearing up cities, and the church can't be heard. I struggle with that because
We have to question our notion of what is the church, and
we
and
we
the
are
church.
we are the church.
We are the church. The church is in us, and that's when I say we have to question the notion of what is the church. I'm gonna be honest with you, man. Just because somebody calls themselves a minister or a reverend over here, I'm not buying that no more. Okay, I'm not buying that ticket no more. Uh, your ministry can be proven in your actions. Where are you at when God's children are suffering?
God's word says man will be known by his fruit. So
Yeah.
I'm asking, the only question you need to ask a minister when he stands up there getting his $30,000 for his latest speech is, where's your fruit? You know,
Where's your fruit,
where's the people being saved by you and what you do? Where's the people
Yeah.
being rescued by you and what you do? Where's the people being fed by you and what you do? Where's the lives
Yeah.
being changed, transformed, and turned around by you and what you do? That's the question that we need to be asking these ministers that are being paid $30,000 to come into a community and talk about what kind of change they're making. While they're coming in with their $10,000 silk suit, with a limousine that's brought them to the place after it picked them up from their private jet when their private jet landed at the private airport on the private land strip. I'm struggling. I'm just struggling to see, why people continue to pour in money into those dead end ministries that are doing nothing to change the mindset of the people that they actually have influence over, because they can influence.
Yeah, they've been scared into the belief that if they stop supporting those churches and those ministers, that somehow or another they're going to hell. They really sort of believe that, and that God is judging them based on, But my thing is this: when Jesus ran through the church, he showed righteous indignation to the scribes and the Pharisees and the people who were doing the very things that were not productive towards building relationships with God. And our ministers over here have largely abdicated their responsibility. Like you said, I mean, you noted they're flying around in private jets.
Yeah.
They're having conferences where they charge people. We have a church building. I bet you right now I could go within 5 square miles of my house and probably find at least 20 church buildings, right? And those churches, some of them will be active on Sunday, but most of them will be inactive the rest of the time.
Absolutely. And yet we have cities full of homeless people sleeping on the streets.
Just get ready to say, we have cities where right now in D.C. right now, if I wanted to go, there are homeless people all across the city. And, churches have forgotten what their roles are. Ministers have forgotten what their roles are. They've built themselves up to be pseudo celebrities, and they want to be known as sort of like being a celebrity minister. And up in Baltimore the same way. I don't want to call any names or anything like that, but that's just the extent of things. Here in this.
It really is unfortunate.
That next generation is not having it. That's why church attendance is down. They recognize what's not real and what's real, and they're not going into church simply because you call it church.
Yeah, we can actually see that happening here in the UK. More churches are closing down than opening, and the ones that are opening are emptying as quickly as they open their doors. It's almost as if they open the doors to let them out, not to let them in.
Yeah.
And I don't struggle with it for myself, because I have a strong relationship with my God, and I believe my God is going to do some miraculous things and use me to do some miraculous things. I open up my airwaves. This is not a studio that is governed, owned, or restricted by anybody. This is in the back room of my house, so nobody can tell me who I can interview and who I don't interview. Nobody can tell me what I could talk about and what I don't talk about. So therefore, I can do according to His will for my life right here, talking about the things that matter. And for me, wherever you are, whatever city you're living in, you got to be trying to do something to make a difference right where you are, because change starts with us, right?
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely, man. That's so powerful to hear. I didn't know that was your background, Kerwin. But I truly, honestly believe that unless we really bear down and understand that who God is in us and through us, then we're not going to change any of this. You don't find change happening because there's just so many good people. There are good people who are led by the Lord, who are led by their religious beliefs and convictions, and that's how change happens. We're not setting this up for us; it's for the next generation.
Absolutely, and we have a duty to set it up for the next generation, because we're part of the problem that has created the situation that we're living in.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
Right, well, Jonathan Wickhead, we're about 10 minutes before we're closing. You're going to have to get in whatever you need to get in. You're going to need to start getting it in before we finish.
Well, man, I do want to tell you, first off, thank you for having me on the show. We recognize off the bat that we're going to get limited support with the message that we have without getting it out there. We need as many folks across this country to help get involved with what we're doing. If you don't register on our site, right, and you just want to, contact me, you're out there in the world you guys are in England, and I really love that. Email me directly at jnewton@naapb.org. We need all the help that we can get. The movement for police accountability is still in its beginning stages. My prayer is that we continue to build collaborations, we continue to build the structure and the infrastructure that we can collaborate with other organizations to have an impact on this. It may not happen in my lifetime, but that next generation of kids, it's going to happen. They're going to have a better system of government, or the result is they will have no government at all, because they're not into much of talking like you and I are into. They're into action. And so by the time you work this down to that generation of the 16 to 18-year-olds, after the millennials, they're on a wholly different page. And I can't blame them, because we haven't given them another page to be on. So I'm hoping that we can actually take this bull by the horns and not kick this can on down the road. You can find out more about the National Association Against Police Brutality at www.naapb.org. We're going to be doing our own podcast or live stream. It's going to be called Justice Chats, where we're going to be talking about the law and the status of the law, trying to educate the community on getting informed so they can get empowered, so they can get accountability. You'll be a guest on our show, because we really appreciate what you did with us here today.
Jonathan, it's absolutely been a real pleasure. And just before you go, we've got to be the change that we want to see in our community. Change starts with us. It's going to take people like me and you standing up for what we believe in, and allowing people to see the difference in us, for them to believe that things are possible. And as we begin to shine in our community and people begin to see the good things that we do, our only hope is that they pick up on it and they run with it too.
That's right. Man, I really appreciate you having me. I really do.
Well, Jonathan, it's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to meeting and speaking with you again real soon. But for now, on Issues Today, we're through. We're out of here. And I'll get you a link to this recording of this show where you could use it at your leisure anytime you choose, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. God bless you, Kerwin.
God bless you, Jonathan. You take care, my friend.
Okay.
God bless. We're out of here.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Wow, that was powerful.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system, it was all about survival. It was do or die.
Next week, I'm going to be back with Jerry Summers.
I was too young and foolish to stay in school.
We're going to be talking about his book, Tarnishing the Badge.
Man, I couldn't beat.
But today, we've had Jonathan Newton.
I was swimming in women. I had.
Let's talk about law.
I was getting money. Life was so sweet.
You heard it there, my friends. Change starts with us. You and me. Committed.
Man, don't need no gun in my.
United in belief.
I'll be no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living.
Don't forget, you can also join me again tomorrow morning between the hours of 8 and 10 o'clock GMT for the Wake Up Everybody Sunday Gospel Show, where we do church before church. Gospel according to Dr. Feelgood.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
World Jam Global Radio. This is clarity.
My crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
You have been listening to Kervin Julian, Jonathan Newton, on Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio.
Time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time. Paid for my crime. Already did my time. Pay for my crime. Pay for my crime. Pay for my crime. Pay for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
Well. Trying to cope with this living hell. Trying to cope with this living hell. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Trying to cope with this living hell. This living hell. This living hell. This living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into